Now, Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar walillahi alhamd. Allahu akbar. Allahu akbar. Allahu akbar. Allahu akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن أشهد أن علي حجة الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. حي على خير الأمر. حي على خير الأمر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن عليا أمير المؤمنين إماما متكئا حجة الله.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم، وأن عليا ولي الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير العمل، حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه، إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصلي لربك وانحر، إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. اللهم صل على فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها بعدد ما أحاط به علمك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله كما هو أهله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. سمع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. يا من له الدنيا والآخرة ارحم من ليس له الدنيا والآخرة بجاه محمد وعترته الطاهرة. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. لا إله إلا الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. اللهم
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة. إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متكئين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأباريق وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون وحور عين كأمثال اللؤلؤ المكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخضود وطلح منضود وظل ممدود وماء مسكوب وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء فجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم وظل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون إذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أئنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الهيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدهنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية جحيم إن هذا لهو حق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات. کیا رہا خیموں میں شیکے ایک اداسی رہ گئی کیا رہا خیموں میں شیکے ایک اداسی رہ گئی صرف رونے کو محمد کی نواسی رہ گئی چھینتا تھا شمر چادر اور زینب بار بار چھینتا تھا شمر چادر اور زینب بار بار اپنی چادر کے محافظ کو بلاتی رہ گئی اے مسلمانوں تمہاری غیرتیں کیا ہو گئی اے مسلمانوں تمہاری غیرتیں کیا ہو گئی تم تماشائے تھے زینب منہ چھپاتی رہ گئی قید میں بالی سکینہ کو ملا بابا کا سر قید میں بالی سکینہ کو ملا بابا کا سر منہ پہ منہ رکھ کر جو سوئی ماں جگاتی رہ گئی مادر اصغر نہ بیٹھی سائے میں اصغر کے بعد مادر اصغر نہ بیٹھی سائے میں اصغر کے بعد سائے میں آئے تو زندہ لاش باقی رہ گئی ہر تماچے پر سکینہ منہ پہ رکھ کر ننھے ہاتھ ہر تماچے پر سکینہ منہ پہ رکھ کر ننھے ہاتھ نیل رخساروں کے غازی کو دکھاتی رہ گئی کیا رہا خیموں میں شیکے ایک اداسی رہ گئی محمد وعلی محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم
Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, dearest brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum, Jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen, as well as all other marhumin. Surah Mubarakatul Fatiha. Dua Shafai Mariz is requested for all those who are in need here and elsewhere. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ 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 Ya Allah. The Muharram and Safar Fund is still open. Please see Brother Abbas Alu or Brother Sibtain Yusufali in the men's side or Sister Fatima Abdul Hussein in the sister's side to make a donation. You may also use the QR code displayed on the screen in order to donate. A kind reminder that the ladies' majlis will be tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. The ladies' majlis will be held on the ladies' side instead of on the gents' side. We'll now have majlis by Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة بعد الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. مؤمنين مؤمنات, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Previously, we've talked about how Azadari, these morning commemorations and gatherings, they've transformed and evolved over time. From the way that the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the way that they had performed it and engaged in it and encouraged others to do that at that time, right after Karbala. As we move forward in time, we see that new things take shape, things get added, certain things get taken away. For example, right now, this session or this gathering that we're here for, this idea of, the 10th that we're gathered for is not something that usually you find in other cultures, let alone in history. Other cultures, for example, will have after the Ashra or after the 12th night or 13th night, then they may continue with their majalis, normally every weekend if they can find speakers, right? So most cultures, they'll continue the Azza up until Eid al-Zahra, Eid al-Shuja', right? Up until that time. And based on various different factors, they will either have it every weekend, or like these kind of communities, they'll have it on specific nights, like the 10th or the 20th after Ashura or the 30th, etc., right? Up until the end. One of the main things that has been changed and added within this, right, because this is a change as well, is how we've talked about the initial azadari, the initial sort of majalis were purely informational, meaning that it was just the Ahlul Bayt trying to tell the people that they were, speaking to, their audience, what exactly took place on the battlefield of Karbala. It was purely informational. And then as they returned back to Medina, then there's this idea where they started adding in poetry, right? So just in the beginning, though, you see pure sort of information or storytelling about what took place in Karbala on Ashura, and then with a mix of poetry trying to incite the emotions of those who were listening. This was pretty much the original form of Azza and Azadari. Over time, Shias have taken these majalis ul Azza and decided that beyond the information, like beyond the retelling of the story, which we end up calling musiba or masa'ib or ghambayan, besides that, we can add something to that and have some sort of discussion or a lecture, usually a monologue lecture before that, because we realize that there's a lot of information about Shia Islam that most of us don't know. We're not going to go and read books. We're probably not going to go and take a class. We're not going to go to Hawza. So for many ulama, they saw these majalis as an opportunity to try and educate the Shia masses. So that's why nowadays, that's the format that we have. It's a bit of quote-unquote education, sometimes, depends on the speaker. But usually it's some sort of information, right? Telling or teaching something. And then at the end, there's this masa'ib and musiba and gham bayan. So this is the format that most of us we've been used to since I think most of us have grown up. That's the way it's been. So we've been following through because it seems to be beneficial for our communities. And of course, the question is, what exactly should we be learning? There's a lot of things that we need to learn about, whether they're related to Karbala and Ashura and Aza or otherwise. Normally in these times, we've decided that, let's focus on something having to do with Muharram, having to do with Azadari, having to do with Ashura and Karbala and the message, something related to it, so that we can learn from that and try to implement it in our lives, right? If you remember last year, we took this time and we went through the khutbah of Sayyida Zainab bint Ali alayha salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraj. And the reason we went through that is one, most of us probably knew or know of her khutbah in Kufa, but maybe we didn't know the actual details. Or even if we've read it or even heard it before, maybe we hadn't taken time on going through each and every line to see what exactly was she saying to the people of Kufa. Why was she addressing them in that way? So what we tried to do by examining the different lines from her khutbah in Kufa is we tried to figure out what exactly was the problem with the people of Kufa, or in general, anybody who gave back or disobeyed their imam. Why did people break that loyalty and that oath? Even the Shias, right? There were Shias and non-Shias. Asantum. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Why was there this breaking of the oath? What were the spiritual diseases amongst the Shias or the general Muslim population, right? If you recall, in the beginning, Sayyida Zainab alayha salam was saying that you were treacherous people. You make promises, but then you break them. She was going, each characteristic, each negative characteristic that they had, she went through. She would, according to some, she even quoted an ayah of Quran that even Bibi Fatima alayha salam had quoted in her own sermon of Fadak. So the same sort of style of reprimanding people, the general Muslim populace, about their lack of iman and their lack of connection to the Ahlul Bayt, she seemed to have used that same sort of format as well. In that same sort of line, we wanted to continue with that. We know that there were various khutbahs that were also given in Kufa. There's one famous khutbah that pretty much all of our historians agree upon, or they all say it took place, and generally the matan or the words are pretty much unanimous. And this is, of course, the famous khutbah of Imam Sajjad, Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil. There's other khutbahs that have been done as well. So just one more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So these two other khutbahs, there's two other possible khutbahs in addition to Imam Sajjad's khutbah in Kufa. These two ones are disputed. They're a bit unknown. And sometimes the dispute among historians is one, whether or not they even took place in the first place. Like, did they actually happen or not? And the other is, okay, let's just say we agree that these other two khutbahs happened. We're not sure who the actual khatib was. We don't know who was reciting it. So even our Shia scholars, our historians, disagree about who exactly were these individuals that were giving the khutbahs. So I want to mention some of these things, and then we're going to focus on one of these, inshallah. I don't think we'll start the actual khutbah tonight. We'll give some biography of who we're going to talk about, and then maybe in our next session that we go through, then we'll talk a bit more, and we'll start going through the lines of that khutbah as well. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So there's one that's less disputed. And this one is attributed to Kulthum. Okay, so what's the dispute over here? So many say that yes, in Kufa, in addition to Bibi Zainab alayha salam, in addition to Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, Kulthum also gave a khutbah as well. You say, okay, what's the dispute over here? So most would agree that somebody named Kulthum said something, gave some words, gave a khutbah. The question is this: who exactly is this Kulthum? Now, when we hear Kulthum, who are you all normally thinking about? This is where you can answer if you want to. Kulthum, the daughter of who? Hasan, the daughter of Imam Ali, Kulthum bint Ali. That's normally who comes to our mind, right? So many historians say this is the one that has given a khutbah, right? You had one child, right, of Bibi Zainab, and now another child of Ali, another daughter of Ali, Kulthum, she also gives a khutbah as well. Others say, look, this is not the case. This is actually also Bibi Zainab. So, how is that the case? They say, well, both, and this is again where some of the details in history get a little tricky. They say both of the daughters of Imam Ali were actually both named Zainab. One was Zainab al-Kubra, who we call Bibi Zainab, and one was Zainab al-Sughra. This Zainab al-Kubra, she was actually called Kulthum. That's how she was referred to. And the younger Zainab, who we call Kulthum, wasn't referred to as Kulthum. So now you can see how this can get a little confusing, right? So some historians say, look, when the historians are writing that there is a khutbah by Kulthum, it's either, the one that we know as Kulthum bint Ali, meaning that other daughter, or it's actually Bibi Zainab, because she was actually known, that was her nickname. That's how she was referred to, as Kulthum as well. So it's not two separate khutbahs actually. What some historians have done in their books is they've put the bulk of her khutbah, and then they say, for example, Imam Sajjad gave his khutbah, and then she came back, Bibi Zainab came back and said some more things and added on to Imam Sajjad's khutbah afterwards. This is the opinion of some, right? So most don't deny that somebody referred to as Kulthum gave a khutbah. What they're not sure about is who actually was this Kulthum. Either it's the one that we refer to as Bibi Zainab, meaning Zainab al-Kubra, alayha salam, or it was the other Kulthum, the one that we normally refer to as Kulthum bint Ali, alayha salam. So these are the sort of two disputes. Most of our ulama will say, no, it's probably the Kulthum that you and I are used to referring to, right? Because most likely every single person present had something to say, and they wanted to address the people of Kufa. This is not the khutbah that I actually want to go through. Maybe inshallah, in a future session, maybe we'll go through that as well because it's beneficial. But there's one other khutbah. That second one that I said is unknown. And this is the one that I want to focus on. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So we said, first one that everybody pretty much knows about is from Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Then we have two that are disputed, unknown, details we're not sure. One of them is probably Kulthum bint Ali alayhi salam. That's probably hers. The second one is by, again, here's the dispute. One is whether it took place or not. If it took place, then who is it? In books right now, if you and I look at these books, it will be attributed to Sakina bint al-Hussein alayhi salam. And when they see, and we see Sakina bint al-Hussein, who are we thinking about? That 3 or 4-year-old daughter of Imam Hussein. And so what ulama do is when they read this khutbah and they see how, Bibi Sakina is addressing the people of Kufa, they start to go and say, look, this one had such a huge effect on the people of Kufa. Why? Well, because it's a 3-year-old, it's a 4-year-old who's speaking in such an eloquent way. She's reprimanding the people of Kufa. I mean, inshallah, when we get to the actual khutbah, you'll see, like, these words are really, really powerful. So you can imagine, imagine a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old girl coming in the middle of all these individuals, in the middle of the streets, speaking with a loud voice, eloquently, right, praising Allah, condemning people in front of her, mentioning that she's from Ahlul Bayt and all these different fada'il. This is a powerful thing, and they say that people who are around there, it completely destroyed them. They were already destroyed after being condemned by Bibi Zainab, by Kulthum, and then by Imam Sajjad. So then, of course, this young girl comes. Now, there's no morale left in them. There's nothing left. But this is one opinion. Say, okay, this is Sakina. But this is normally what you would find. If you Google it right now, that's probably what you're going to see, right? The other khutbahs and normal contemporary books, this is what you'll see. Is that this is the khutbah of Sakina bint al-Hussein, or some will say Sukaina bint al-Hussein. And this Sakina, as other communities address her, is Ruqayya, right? So some will say, yeah, this is the khutbah of Ruqayya. Okay. Other books, more classical books, the ones that actually have this khutbah mentioned, won't mention the name Sakina or Sukaina or Ruqayya. They will say this is the khutbah of Fatima bint al-Hussein. Okay, now the question is this. Who is this Fatima? Is it the same thing as Bibi Sakina that we call Bibi Sakina, or is it somebody else? So this is what I want to, in a sense, maybe in a few minutes, discuss that. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Most of us who have gone to other communities, listened to other speakers, especially multicultural centers or centers or speakers who are from a different background than you and I are, right? When they speak about the personalities that you and I have that love and devotion towards, the ones that we cry over, sometimes it gets confusing because they don't use the same names that you and I use. So one example, right, is Ali al-Asghar. Normally, when other communities refer to him, they may refer to him as Ali al-Asghar or al-Asghar, right, the 6-month-old baby. Other communities, though, they will call him Abdullah al-Radi or Abdullah, right, this one who is being nursed. And this is a name that has been mentioned, and usually Arab communities will use this sort of name. So sometimes you might go there and you're hearing this, this masiba or masaib of Abdullah, and if you haven't learned about these points before, you might get confused. Who is this person talking about? Who's Abdullah? Even more confusing is that there were multiple personalities on Ashura who became shaheed who were named Abdullah, right? Some say, in addition to this Abdullah ibn Hussein, there was another Abdullah ibn Hussein, one who was a bit older, who may have become shaheed. In addition to that, there may have been an Abdullah ibn Hasan, who also may have become shaheed. So this becomes very confusing, right? In one sense, it's a beautiful thing that the Ahlul Bayt are naming all of their children, similar or pretty much the same names. At the same time, for us, it's really confusing. Every single one is Fatima. Every single one is Ali. And there's all these Abdullahs, right? Like, who is who? We don't know. Even our historians, right? If you and I are confused, think of the historians. When you go back to the original books of history and all these names are listed, even amongst historians, they're not really sure. So amongst this personality, amongst the children of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they're not certain about how many children he had and what their names were. What I want to do first is go through some of the basic opinions that exist about who were the children of Imam Hussein. Now, the reason I want to mention this, I'm not normally somebody that likes to go through history, especially this sort of detailed history. But for a lot of us, I think it can be, number one, a source of confusion, right? So I want to help kind of get rid of that source of confusion. And the second thing is that if we're going to start going through this khutbah of this person, Fatima, we need to know exactly who this Fatima is. Because it could be this 3 or 4-year-old girl, who we call Sakina, it could be her, but it could be another daughter. And normally you and I, what we have in our mind in terms of the children of Imam Hussein, we're only thinking of 4 children. That's it. 3 sons, 1 daughter. That's who we are normally thinking about, right? 3 sons being, in order of what we believe to be their ages, from eldest to youngest, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, then Ali al-Akbar, and then Ali al-Asghar. This is usually who we have in mind in terms of sons. And the only daughter that you and I think about, or even think that existed, is Bibi Sakina. That's it. In our minds, we think there's only 4. Now the problem is this. I haven't seen any scholar that says there's only 4. Almost every single historian and biographer says there were at least 6, if not more. So I want to mention these 3 views so we can at least understand who were some of the other children of Imam Hussein. But our main focus is going to be about this personality, who is Fatima bint al-Hussein alayha salatu wassalam, salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So if you're not paying attention, it's going to get confusing because I'm going to mention kids and different names. I wanted to put together like a simple PowerPoint, like a family tree. I didn't. I got lazy. I ran out of time. Whatever excuse I have, I just didn't do it, okay? So try your best to picture it in your mind if you can, right? I'll try to make sure I don't jump into different names because historians use different names. I want to try to use the names that you and I are, we think of normally, right? So I'm going to try to stick to Sakina for the 3 or 4-year-old. And if there's something else, I'll mention that specifically, right? But I don't want to go through all these different views that, okay, is this person Ruqayya, is she Sakina, is she Sukina? I want to try not to confuse us more than you probably already are confused, right? So let's try to simplify it if we can. Pretty much there's 3 views in terms of how many children are from Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. 3 opinions are either he had 6 kids, 4 boys, 2 girls, or he had 9 children, 6 boys, 3 girls, or some will say 10 plus, and then it'll be a different combination of boys and girls. Normally, most ulama won't go with 10, right? They'll say, the 10 is a bit too much, and it's probably just a bunch of different nicknames that have been mixed together throughout history. It's probably not 10. Okay, it's one of the opinions out there. I'm not going to mention the details of that one. We're going to stick to the famous one, at least one of the more famous ones, which is of Shaykh al-Mufid, right, rahmatullah alayh, which he brings in Kitab al-Irshad. He says Imam Hussein alayhi salam had 6 children, 4 boys, 2 girls. So he said, okay, you and I know of at least 3 of the boys, right? Imam Sajjad, Ali al-Akbar, and Ali al-Asghar. We know those three. Who is this fourth one? They say this fourth one is Ja'far ibn al-Hussein. The reason you and I don't know about Ja'far is because he wasn't present at Karbala. In fact, he died way before Imam Hussein, according to some, before Imam Hussein even left for Karbala. So, are there things written about him? Again, different reports will come, but because there's nothing really about his life, you won't really see it in a book. You and I probably don't even know he existed. But at the very least, we should know there was some child named Ja'far who died at a relatively younger age. Okay. Now they say one of the other reasons we don't know much about him, about Ja'far ibn al-Hussein, is because he never got married. So therefore he had no kids. So there is no legacy for him. So his name, in a sense, doesn't really live on. Some of the other children, because they got married. They had kids, and then grandkids, and then great-grandkids. And these children were involved during the Umayyad era, and then some of them involved during certain political maneuvers or some of the things that were going on there, right, in the missions that were happening with the Ahlul Bayt. Because they were involved with the Umayyads and the Abbasids, some of the names are, known to us, right? So again, I'm not going to go through the sons because that's not our main objective here. So I mentioned 4 children so far, which were the 4 boys. Now the 2 girls. So of course, so they're both referred to as Fatima. Both of them are referred to as Fatima. One is Fatima al-Kubra and one is Fatima al-Sughra. The one that many believe happens to be the one that gave this khutbah is this Fatima al-Kubra. This is the one that many who mention this khutbah, they say Fatima al-Kubra, the eldest daughter of Imam Hussein, and some say actually even the eldest child, but that's probably disputed. Just probably the eldest daughter, the elder of the Fatimas, the 2 Fatimas. She was the one who actually gave the khutbah. So she's the one that I want to mention here. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, is the other Fatima al-Sughra, is she the one that we call Sakina? Probably not. Right? Probably not. It actually was somebody else. That's why I don't want to go into those details because it'll get even more confusing, right? We've heard the name Ruqayya before. And there's another daughter who's named Zainab. I'm not going to go into their details as well, again, because I don't want to overwhelm you with all these names, all the biographies. I want to stick to this one. Fatima bint al-Hussein al-Kubra. The one who normally every single historian says existed and was the eldest daughter of Imam al-Hussein. So I want to go through her biography because she has been mentioned and her history doesn't seem to be disputed at all. And she had an interesting life before Karbala, during Karbala, and after Karbala. So what I want to do in a few minutes tonight, inshallah, is mention just some of her biographical information so we can get to know her, so we know who she is. She is one of the elite, stronger, mentioned, honorable members of the Ahlul Bayt. It's good for us to know who she is, especially if we've never even heard that she existed before. So we're going to mention this, and then inshallah, in one of our future sessions, we'll then start going through this khutbah that's attributed to her. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, just a reminder, we're not talking about Bibi Sakina right now. We're talking about Fatima al-Kubra. That's how most scholars will refer to her. So we know that Bibi Sakina, her mother was Rabab, right? So who are the parents of well, obviously Imam Hussein is the father. Who is the mother of Fatima al-Kubra? They say the mother's name was Ishaq bint Talha ibn Ubaidullah. So many of you know these names of some of the Sahabas, right? Talha and Zubair, right? Who were with the Prophet. Some of them were kind of with Imam Ali, and they kind of weren't. And some of them went back and forth, and their children had different opinions. They have their own history. But this famous companion, Talha, who Sunnis pretty much revere as one of the ones guaranteed paradise, so they take a lot of narrations from him. Shi'as, it depends, because there are parts he's with Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he's defending, but then at the same time, he's also going against Imam Ali in certain things as well. So he's got a very shaky history. Regardless, his daughter, Ishaq, gets married to Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. So Imam al-Hasan had multiple wives. One of these wives is this person, Ishaq. So Imam Hasan and Fatima al-Kubra, they get married first. After Imam Hasan passes away, then after her iddah is finished, she remarries who? Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So initially, Ishaq, the daughter of Talha, she's married to Imam al-Hasan first. After he passes away, then she gets married to Imam al-Hussein. With Imam Hussein, then she has this daughter, Fatima al-Kubra. So when was she born? What was her age in Karbala? I think this is going to give us a general idea about who she was, right? They're not exactly sure about when she was born, the exact date. Again, these things get tricky. There's not people who are sitting there, like writing down everybody's birth date. Sometimes it was known based on other events. Like, okay, you know what? If Imam Hasan died in this year, and then we know that other narrations say that, okay, she got married to Imam Hussein after her iddah was complete, then it was probably a few months, maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years max. So they sort of calculate things like this, right? They take all these context clues. That's how usually historians will figure out different dates. Usually you don't have people who are sitting there like, okay, somebody's born, let me write down their birthday and that's it, right? There's not like birthday parties going on. Like that didn't exist for them. So most historians will agree that she was born in the year 51 Hijri, or what we'd say in the Common Era, CE, 671. So this is approximately 10, maybe 11 years before Karbala, which then, of course, makes her 10 or 11 while she's in Karbala. What happened to her before that? Let me mention that if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Before Karbala, she actually had been married. Right? So before Imam Hussein left, she was actually married. Now, who did she marry? They say that there was a proposal from the son of Imam Hasan, one of the sons, who is known as Hasan al-Muthanna, which literally means Hasan II, right? Hasan al-Muthanna had come to his uncle, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He said, I want to marry one of your daughters. Like he made a general proposal. Normally in those days, some people would come, directly for one individual. They say, I want to marry this specific girl, this specific daughter. Other times, when they saw that the father was that noble, right, especially if it was a member of the Ahlul Bayt, they would sometimes just come and say, look, I would marry any of your daughters. You pick one for me, basically, right? So Hasan al-Muthanna, right, Hasan II, son of Imam Hasan alayhi salam. He comes, gives his proposal to Imam Hussein. Imam Hussein responds and says, look, these are my daughters. You can pick whomever you want, and I'll, give you whoever you want. But Hasan al-Muthanna felt, very shy. Like imagine, like your Imam is telling you, pick any of my daughters. So he became very shy. He didn't know what to do, so he remained silent. And when he saw that as a sign of his humility, right, kind of that, not shame, but, just being shy, he said, fine, I'll pick for you then. So he said, I love all of my children. I love all of my daughters. But he said, I'm going to pick this one, Fatima al-Kubra. Why? He said, you know what? Among my children, all of my children have this shabaha. They are shabi of their grandparents. All of them. He said, for example, we know Ali al-Akbar, alayhi salam, he was the shabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And they say, in addition, all of his daughters were the shabi or shabiha of Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam as well. So Imam Hussein says, look, all of my daughters are beautiful. All my daughters have great akhlaq. However, this one, Fatima al-Kubra, she has the most shabaha, the most resemblance to my mother Fatima. Because of that, I'm going to choose her for you. Right? So he is looking for the best one because he recognizes the status of, right, his nephew. Because of that, he says, I'm going to marry you off to the one that most resembles my mother Fatima. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, Fatima al-Kubra is married to Hasan al-Muthanna, right? Imam Hasan's daughter, Imam Hasan's son. These two were actually together from that time, meaning they got married before Karbala took place, right? So they're in Medina, they got married. They actually remained together from Medina all the way to Karbala, to Kufa, to Sham, and then back to Medina. They were alive and together the whole time. Again, normally we're confused because when we think about the males who survived Karbala, Imam Sajjad, and then sometimes people will, remind us Imam Baqir, alayhi salam, right? That's it. Hasan al-Muthanna, according to most, he was alive and he was there. Okay, well, what happened to him in Karbala then? What historians say is that he went out to fight, right? I think his age maybe was around somewhere between 18 and 21. I think he was very similar to Ali al-Akbar, if I'm not mistaken. So he goes out and he fights, and he had a lot of injuries. He was actually able to be nursed back to health. So there was somebody present in Karbala who took his body and brought him back to Kufa, and in Kufa nursed him back to health. And some say he sustained very, very severe injuries. According to some, he even lost both arms, similar to Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. Others say no, it was just 18 severe injuries, but his arms were intact. khair, that's a minor detail. He was severely injured, but he was taken from the battlefield by somebody. I believe her name was, I think his own personal nurse. Asma bint Khadija, I think may have been her name. So she took the body, she took Hasan al-Muthanna and brought him back to Kufa. Brought him back to Kufa and nursed him back to health, right? So now they're together, right? So they meet back together in Kufa. They go from Kufa to Sham, from Sham back to Medina. When they're back in Medina, they actually have 4 children together. These 4 children are Abdullah, Ibrahim, Hasan, and Zainab. So some of you may know that now we have 3 Hasans here. We have Imam Hasan alayhi salam, his child, Hasan al-Muthanna, Hasan II, and then Hasan al-Muthanna has another one he calls Hasan, which is Hasan al-Muthallath, Hasan III, right? So a line of these. We see this a lot in the Ahlul Bayt, right? They will name a lot of their children after their grandparents or after their fathers. This is something that we see a lot. And sometimes if these, like the second, third, these, adjectives are not mentioned, it can be very, very confusing, right? Because everybody's named the same thing. So we can also understand their names are almost identical, if not very similar. Their nicknames are pretty much the same, if not very similar. You can understand now why historians are going to be very, very confused. If we're all living in the same time and somebody has, a certain nickname, right? Like, I don't know, Shorty, whatever. I know you guys have your own Swahili and Gujarati nicknames, whatever. Whatever, I don't know what your nicknames are, right? You call somebody Shorty. Now, we all know, or you all know who that person is. Even though their father may have been Shorty or their grandfather may have been that too, we all know who that person, if you come and say, Shorty's not coming tonight. Okay, we all know who they're talking about. But now, let's say that's written down or whatever, it's in a text message or it's in some post somewhere. And then 20, 30, 40 years down the line, somebody looks at that. They're not going to know which one they're talking about, right? So you can understand why historians will get confused. Because they're looking at all this stuff. They see the name Ali, they see the name Muhammad, they see the name Fatima or Sakina or Sukaina and all these names. And they're like, okay, who exactly is being referred to over here? We're not sure. They'll take the context clues and they'll try to figure out exactly who was there. Let's go back to what we're talking about. A lot of these children, right? So this line of Hasan al-Muthanna and Fatima al-Kubra, they continued on. So a lot of them got married, they had children, and they went on. They fought against the Umayyads. They fought against the Abbasids, many of them. Many of them were tortured. Many of them were killed. So you'll see some of these descendants, these Imam Zadehs, right? Imam Zadegan. These descendants and members of the Ahlul Bayt, they are spread throughout various different areas if they had gone out and actually fought against the tyrants of their time, right? After Hasan al-Muthanna had died, again, Hasan al-Muthanna, Fatima al-Kubra, they are together in Medina. After Hasan al-Muthanna had died, they say that Fatima al-Kubra had mourned his loss for 1 year. And in that year, they say every single day, she was doing roza. She was fasting. Every single night, she was up, right? Praying all night. Namaz al-shab, salatul layl. Now see how a member of the Ahlul Bayt, how they perform their aza, how they engage in gham, how they mourn. We've all lost loved ones, and some who are very close, whether it's somebody younger than us, somebody older than us. Sometimes expected, sometimes unexpected. You see the difference in sabr that a member of the Ahlul Bayt has? Somebody who truly has the akhlaq and the fada'il of the Ahlul Bayt. When their loved one, when her husband passes away, she's not sitting there questioning God's justice. She's not screaming like, how could something like this happen? I'm from the line of Bani Hashim. This kind of thing shouldn't happen to me. Woe is me. She's not out there questioning Islamic fundamentals. She's there increasing her ibadah. Every night, they say, every day, she was at the qabr, at the grave of her husband, reciting, offering ibadah. She got closer to Allah through this death rather than farther away. Right? These kind of things should be an example for you and I on what are the ways that you and I should engage in grief and azaa of our own close ones, right? Okay, when we're coming and mourning the Shohada of Karbala, this is the way that we do it, alhamdulillah. But the way that we mourn the ones who are closest to us, we should think, look, there are cultural ways of doing it, which are wonderful, but there are other ways that we can do it, right? Sponsoring majalis, for example, reciting Quran for them, giving sadaqah in their name, going to their graves and reciting specifically, which alhamdulillah many of us do, reciting specific sort of prayers and then gifting that to them, right? These are the types of things that are going to benefit them. Not freaking out or crying or questioning your whole existence and things like that. This is not going to be beneficial. Imagine their legacy, this person that passed away, especially if it's somebody older than us, right? A parent or a grandparent. They want to leave behind a mu'min or a mu'minah. If we're sitting there questioning God's existence, do you think that's helping them in barzakh? They wanted to try to leave behind somebody with iman, or even if it's your own spouse that passed away. Do you think that you freaking out and questioning God's existence is in any way helping them out? No. If you can strengthen your connection to Allah, to the Ahlul Bayt, this is something that will benefit your own soul as well as their soul as well. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Two other points I want to mention, and then inshallah we will end. One is first about her death. They say that she could have lived anywhere between 35 to 60 years after Karbala took place. They're not sure. So she either died in her 60s or her 90s. They're not sure. And she either passed away in Medina, like she remained there for the rest of her life, and that's it. She's buried in Medina. Some say Baqi. Others say no. She actually had accompanied Bibi Zainab, alayhi salam, went with her to Sham when she was exiled, and actually is buried over there. Many of you who have gone to Sham for ziyarah, you would have gone to a qabristan known as Babu Saghir, right? The small door, basically, right? The small qabristan. Over there, there's many members of the Ahlul Bayt who are buried there. And apparently some say this Fatima, if you see this Fatima there, this is the Fatima that they are referring to who's buried there. Okay, again, that's a dispute. The one other important thing that I think you and I should understand is, okay, we've mentioned a lot of the simple biographical, like trivia details. Okay, it was nice, but did she actually have any virtues? Was she actually a special member of the Ahlul Bayt? Okay, she prayed all day. When her husband passed away, she prayed all night. She fasted all day. That's wonderful. Was there anything else really important or beneficial or great and grand about her? Was she actually mentioned in the words of the Ahlul Bayt? We say yes. She's actually been mentioned by Sunnis and Shias as well, in terms of her fada'il, and because she was a muhadditha. She was a narrator of a hadith as well. So a lot of these famous hadith that you and I would know, she's actually in that chain. So without her, we wouldn't have some of these sort of narrations that have become very famous for you and I. So I'm going to mention some of these inshallah, and then we will go ahead and end. If you can recite. Actually, you know what? I'll mention the name of the Imam because then that'll give you an excuse to recite the salawat. So we have two narrations which are attributed to Imam al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. I'll skip the Arabic. So Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam is talking about the last moments of Imam Hussein, or basically when he went and did his al-wida, his final farewell when he was in the tents. So normally we hear his farewell to Bibi Zainab, we hear the farewell to Imam Sajjad. They say that in his final farewell, Fatima al-Kubra was there as well. Again, a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old girl. She's there. And in this hadith, it's mentioned that Imam Hussein recited his wasiyah to Fatima al-Kubra. In addition to reciting it and saying what his final wishes are, what his will is, and what he wants done, all the amanat that he had collected from his father, Imam Ali alayhi salam, which he had collected from Rasulullah, all of those things he actually had given to Fatima al-Kubra. He said, these are the amanat of wilaya and imama. You have to protect these. So she actually was in charge of protecting these, I don't know what to call it, religious paraphernalia or something, like imamat paraphernalia, something like that, right? Like, we hear of like the suhaf, these famous books, or these tafsirs of Quran, or famous swords, or rings, things like that. Sometimes they say all of these things were passed down so that it would continue on, and they would end up with Imam Zaman. So they say these things were initially given to Fatima al-Kubra, and then in a future time, she eventually, once Imam Sajjad alayhi salam became Imam, or when it was safe, then she passed it on to Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. So when we talk about Bibi Zainab saving wilaya and imama, yeah, definitely that's the case. At the same time, Fatima al-Kubra is also somebody who's protecting and saving wilaya. All of these secret treasures, even the wasiyah, the amanat of Imam Hussein, she is being entrusted with that. So that alone should give us some idea about the status that she holds. I want to mention some other narrations that I talked about, that she is part of the chain of these narrations as well. So these ones are coming. Again, some of these we have in both Sunni books and Shia books, and some are just Shia ones. So I'll mention three narrations. So both of the ones I'll mention first, they come from Imam Hussein alayhi salam, who says, I narrate from my mother Fatima alayhi salam, who says that she narrates from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. First one is, again, I'm going to skip in the Arabic because we're running out of time. So this one is, if someone goes to sleep while their hands are dirty and unclean, if this person gets sick, they have no one to blame but themselves. So if you go to sleep, right, you go into bed, your hands are nasty, they're dirty. If you end up getting sick, Rasulullah, and then through Bibi Fatima, through Imam Hussein, and then through Fatima al-Kubra, is saying, you're the only person to blame for this, right? Now, I'm not, well, I don't want to say anything about that, but clean your hands before you go to sleep. I don't know what else to tell you, right? It should be obvious, I guess, to be hygienic, but I don't know, sometimes you get really tired, or maybe you're in a rush, or some people, after eating some very greasy, meaty food, especially if your hands really get in there, maybe you might just wash it off real quick and go in there. I don't know. I'm assuming, hopefully you're all washing with soap or sanitizing, but I've seen otherwise, unfortunately, sometimes. So Rasulullah is saying, look, you get sick because you went to sleep and you didn't properly clean your hands, then you got nobody to blame for yourself. So the takeaway, right, the implementation, the modern day example is please clean yourself or wash your hands at the very least. But there's a lot of other narrations about what you should do before you go to sleep. I think this should be the most obvious and easiest one. Clean your hands, inshallah, hopefully that'll protect you from various sicknesses. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I feel like, all right, that wasn't a really great hadith. Okay, well, let's offer two other ones. So I started off with the one that's less controversial. I said, all right, let's kick it up a notch, right? We'll do two more. Another one, same thing, coming originally from Rasulullah, is he's attributed to have said, if two oppressive armies fight each other, two oppressive armies meet on a battlefield, Allah keeps his hands away. Allah doesn't get involved. He doesn't care that these two, Zalimin, these two false armies, these two fake, oppressive armies are fighting each other. Allah doesn't get involved. He says, look, it doesn't matter who wins. Obviously, most likely one of them is going to win and defeat the other. Rasulullah is saying, for Allah, it doesn't matter who wins, because at the end of the day, at some point, Allah is going to wipe both of them out. Any army of dhulm will eventually get completely wiped out. So some of us, when we're paying attention to, international politics, a lot of the things that are going on right now, and we might be really scared, this army or this group or these people are getting stronger and more powerful, and, all this inward infighting and stuff is happening, don't worry. Just like some other countries, oppressive countries, engage in proxy wars, sometimes Allah does the same thing. He takes these two oppressive armies, he's like, you guys go fight it out, and eventually both of you will get wiped out as well. And sometimes that happens to other people, right? It doesn't have to be armies, sometimes it's warring factions in our community as well. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. One more. And this one's probably the most controversial. How many of you are familiar with this hadith or this event of Raddu Shams? Well, maybe because I said it in Arabic, that's why, right? Rad means return, or the returning or coming back. Shams means the sun. Okay, now do you know what I'm talking about? Right, the returning of the sun. So this is obviously either a very famous hadith, or if you listen to certain speakers right now, it's a very infamous hadith, right? Because according to this, it's not our main objective, so I'm not going to go through the controversy here. Raddu Shams says that either, because there's two different versions. One says that this is the case where Rasulullah, at a time when he fell asleep in the lap of Imam Ali, he woke up and asked Imam Ali, hey, did you read your Asr? He said, no, I didn't, because you're sleeping in my lap and I didn't want to wake you up. He said, okay, the fadila time is gone. It's almost sunset. So Rasulullah made a dua, made the sun come back so that it was that fadila time. Not that it became qada. The fadila time for Asr came back and then Imam Ali prayed. So he called back, he made a dua and called back the sun. This is one version of it. Another version is that this actually took place during the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam's khilafah. Some stuff took place and he called back the sun because something happened in terms of prayer. I don't want to go into the details because that's going to open up a whole bunch of other questions, and then I'll probably see the stuff on Slido, all right, I'm sure in a few days. If that's the case, then we'll address it at that point. All I'm saying here is this. We wanted to just go through and educate ourselves about some of the other personalities in Karbala who are present there. Some who we've never even heard of before, like this personality, Fatima al-Kubra. In addition to all these wonderful, beneficial traits and fada'il and virtues that she has that we've mentioned, the fact that she's narrated all these things. We've mentioned a few, there's many others as well. She's also been somebody who's given a khutbah in front of the people of Kufa. Inshallah, in our next session, we're going to go through what she actually had said. Even if this isn't Bibi Sakina, even if it's just this other daughter, Fatima al-Kubra, still, this is a 10 or 11-year-old girl speaking to all these elders, all these sheikhs, quote unquote, in this manner. Inshallah, we'll see what the words are in this khutbah, and then we'll try to open up line by line, word by word. What is she saying, and what are some lessons we can take from this khutbah? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For most of us, when we think about the tragedy of Karbala, for us, the worst part happens to be on Ashura. That's what usually comes to our mind, right? Is when we think about the battle, we think about the fighting, we think about the blood and the thirst and all this, those who fell down in the battlefield, a body being trampled, heads being cut. These are the things that normally we think about being difficult, being hard, being problematic things. For us, that's the tragedy, that's the bala. But if we really look at history, the bala, the tragedy doesn't end on Ashura, it actually begins then, specifically on Sham-e-Ghariban. The men, those who went out and fought, they were built for war. They were trained for war. They knew what they were getting into. All of the Bani Hashim, all the Ansar, the Ashab, they were warriors. They were looking for death. They were looking for Shahada. They wanted to become Shaheed. They wanted to die for the sake of their Imam, for the sake of Islam. So in a sense, it was easy for them to do this. In fact, we see they were competing to go and fight for that. But are the women and children, were they ever trained to be held in captivity? Did Imam Ali ever train any of his daughters to say, one day you'll be held, tied in ropes, your maqnas, your hijabs, your chadors will be taken away from you, you'll be paraded around like prisoners? Did Imam ever train them for this? Did Imam Hussein ever train Sakina that one day you're going to be slapped by shimmer? That earrings will be pulled from your ears and blood will be dripping down? That they will burn your dress and you'll be running out in the battlefield of Karbala looking and crying? This is not something that anybody has ever trained for. So the bala begins on Sham-e-Ghariba. When these individuals, they go out, this is now, under all these circumstances, now they are going and spreading the message of the Ahlul Bayt. And what's difficult for them is that from Medina, they were being protected. From Medina, it was Abbas with them protecting them. But now Zainab, Aunt Sham-e-Ghariba, is looking out. Abbas, before it was you with your safe, with your spear in your hand, protecting all of us. Now Abbas, look at me with a broken spear in my hand on the dark night, protecting all these children, protecting everyone. Look at me making sure that everyone is protected over here. How much Bibi Zainab's heart would have broken on a night like that. And they say that her heart had broken so much. And they say sometimes either she had a vision or this actually took place. It's a difference of opinion among the ulama. And they say that night when she was there staying up trying to guard the members of the Ahlul Bayt on Sham-e-Ghariba, they say that somebody was coming towards her. Somebody on a horse with his face covered was coming towards her. Immediately she thought that this was one of the soldiers of Umar ibn Sa'd coming to attack her. And when she said that, she said, "Oh soldier, oh enemy, you've done enough to us. Don't come any closer to us. Just because I'm not Abbas, I'm not the son of Ali, I am still a daughter of Ali. I am still from Bani Hashim. We can defend ourselves. And I will defend you and I will fight you." The rider kept coming closer and closer and closer and closer. Finally, when he came close within striking distance, he said, "Don't you know who I am? I am the daughter of Ali. I can strike you down right now." This is when they say the rider removed the covering from his face and said, "Zainab, don't you recognize the face of your father, Ali? You were crying for me so much. Now I'm here. I'm answering your calls." And she would say, according to the ulama in this vision, that, "Baba, Baba, we've been calling you since the Ashar of Ashura. I was calling you from Tal Zainabiyya. Sakina was calling for you when she was out on the plains of Karbala, when she was looking, when her shirt was burnt, she was saying, 'Somebody point me to Najaf, somebody point me to Kufa. I need to go to visit my Dada Ali.'"
ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. ماتم حسين.
Hussein, Ya 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 Hussein. ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई, ज़हरा की बेटियों की रिदाएं उतर गई,
زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، سجاد کو ضعیف صدائیں یہ کر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، لاشوں کو رسیوں میں جکر کر لیے پھرو، لاشوں کو رسیوں میں جکر کر لیے پھرو، سیدانیاں تو گھر سے نکلتے ہی مر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، جاتی تھی جو کبھی کبھی زہرا کی قبر پر، جاتی تھی جو کبھی کبھی زہرا کی قبر پر، شان خدا ہجوم سے کیسے گزر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، ظلم و ستم کی تیز ہوائیں تھی جب چلی، ظلم و ستم کی تیز ہوائیں تھی جب چلی، سب گلشن بطول کی کلیاں بکھر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، گودوں سے راہ شام میں گر گر کے مر گئے، گودوں سے راہ شام میں گر گر کے مر گئے، بچوں کے لاش دیکھ کے مائیں بھی مر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، رملہ یہ پوچھتی تھی سکینہ سے قید میں، رملہ یہ پوچھتی تھی سکینہ سے قید میں، زخمی ہے کان بالیاں بی بی کدھر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی، بازار لے کے جاؤ نا بے پردہ ظالموں، بازار لے کے جاؤ نا بے پردہ ظالموں، مر جائے گی حسین کی بہنیں اگر گئی، زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر 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 گئی سجاد کو ضعیف صدائیں یہ کر گئی زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی زہرا کی بیٹیوں کی ردائیں اتر گئی.
سورۃ مبارک الفاتحہ.
بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. السلام علیکہ یا ابا عبداللہ السلام علیکہ یا ابن رسول اللہ السلام علیکہ یا ابن امیر المؤمنین السلام علیکہ یا ابن فاطمة الزہرا سیدۃ النساء العالمین السلام علیکم ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ. السلام علیکہ یا غریب الغرباء السلطان ابا الحسن مولانا علی بن موسى الرضا كن شفيعنا وشفيع والدينا في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان السلام عليكم أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا وذليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.